Welcome everyone to another session. Today we're really honoured to welcome Ryf Quail. Ryf's the Managing Director of iMedia, Asia, Australia, New Zealand and Southeast Asia. iMedia is part of the Comexposium group. And Ryf, first of all, thank you very much for joining us today, mate.
Thank you for having me. It's really great to be here, Marty.
Yeah, and I'll just do a quick introduction, Ryf, and then we'll get into it. So okay. Ryf is a successful business builder across media and tech, with a career spanning 2 decades across small and large business. He has led a digital media startup from concept to a 9 million turnover in 3 years, the largest in Australia at the time. And I love that, Ryf, because I just had someone, actually, we're launching the podcast this week for a gentleman who did a startup out of Seattle, which was the largest cloud acquisition at the time. So we've got a little bit of a theme going on here, which is cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, he's also enjoyed success in large corporate environments, delivering best-in-class digital and CRM programs for one of the world's largest global professional services firms, as well as being recently recognised as a Leader of the Year for one of the largest event organisers on the planet. So, Ryf, again, thank you very much for joining us, mate.
No worries, thank you.
So, Ryf, do you want to give us a bit of background about iMedia? We can see one of your events in the background there.
Yeah. It's the big one at the back there. So it's iMedia, that one, iMedia Online Retail Summit is the one I've got on the background there. But we run iMedia events, and we run 8 this year. iMedia is a really unique proposition, and it's a little bit different to the events everyone is familiar with. Most people in their verticals or their industries are used to going to some sort of trade show, which involves some content, so an exhibition, and hopefully you swap cards or connect with people on LinkedIn and make some connections. We found over time that, and having sort of played in a couple of verticals, is that really people want to meet each other and actually spend time with each other. So iMedia is a little bit different in that we actually don't actually sell tickets. We actually curate an audience around some content, and we curate an audience at the top of their game within that vertical. And then we sell that audience to sponsors, and the event happens to be a vehicle to do that. In the case of iMedia, it's taking, in the case of iMedia Online Retail Summit, we take 200 heads of e-commerce away to the Gold Coast, to the Sheraton Grand Mirage, and we book the whole hotel out. Those guys, the cost to them is their flights and their time, so they have to be selected.
Yeah.
We have 4 big international keynotes and other commercial content around it. Only a day or so of content across 3. And then sponsors come from all over Australia, around the region, and around the globe, actually, to actually access that audience.
Yeah.
The thing that makes it unique, though, is that it's not wall-to-wall content. We actually create a forum that allows these people to get to know each other. And the goal for us really is that whether they're a retailer in this case, they actually come away with great connections, not only with the sponsors who are looking to sell them solutions, but also with their peers, because the ability to compare notes and sense check and not be isolated on their own is really valuable to these guys. What we find is for something like iMedia, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating marketplace, and for the retailers who are experienced, they come, in this case in iMedia on the Gold Coast, this one coming up, they actually come often with a problem.
Yeah, right.
So we'll go, our challenge is we've got an issue with, single view of the customer across all our retail channels.
Yeah.
And they'll look to come to the show and find vendors to help them solve that problem.
Yeah, I love
and
that.
Then
so
on
they're coming with a clear agenda.
100%
to help their business, not a clear agenda just to learn or just be educated.
The education piece is important. We land the theme with an advisory board, but very much about solving the problems of the day. And then on the vendor side, they love it because, they're our customers, so we coach them to the nth degree to make sure they have a good experience and behave really well on site so they can be successful. But they actually end up delivering a pipeline of leads for their business, which is not just a lead off a webcast, but a lead where they make a really strong connection because they've found common ground, that then they can, follow after the conference and have 3 or 4 months worth of, sales pipeline. Have meaningful meetings before. And it really, iMedia is about accelerating that process.
Yeah.
So the vendors say to us, I can do 3 months of sales in 3 days. And that's the play.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastic experience. And I've been involved with these formats for about 8 years, and it's got more and more refined as we've got going and really got under the skin of how, what makes it tick.
Well, you opened up the next question that I wanted to ask you. What makes it tick? Because one thing you and I, every time, as I shared with you, every time I talk to you, I'm energetic. I'm enthused around what we talk about and the direction that you're taking and how we can help you get there, sort of thing. Let's talk about that from a leadership standpoint, because you've built, created, led, closed some great businesses. So what's that magic for you in leadership that helps you set up a business, connect with clients, and also run teams?
I think for me, it's defining the vision and the mission, and I think, and that doesn't need that vision and mission doesn't need to be commercial. For iMedia, what gives me a buzz, and then ultimately flows through everyone, is we've sort of always said we want a vehicle that moves the market.
Yeah.
And which, just turns the dial. And so really good examples of that for us is like, we're running iMedias in New Zealand. And I lived in New Zealand for a long time. So I've got good connections over there, and I really enjoy it. And I think I have a little advantage over the rest of Australia because Australians don't always have a good run in New Zealand. We ran this iMedia brand summit, which was effectively took away, 55 heads of marketing for enterprise brands in New Zealand, and had a great show, had a ripper show, came away completely buzzed, and that was fantastic. And everyone and all the team were really stoked with the way they executed. But what was the icing on the cake and the real vision around what we will call moving the market is, my friend who works in an agency said, "Your name is mud in the advertising agency, Ryf." And I said, "Why is that?" And he goes, "All the clients came back from Brand Summit and have just gone bonkers and have questioning us on stuff and briefing on stuff we don't know about. What is going on?" And you've just with one 3-day event, you've just driven everyone crazy, and then you've just left. So that was really cool. That was, and I heard it from mates right across all the big holding groups in New Zealand, which was really funny.
Yeah.
The other thing too is it's just iMedia allows people to make connections, which in many cases become lifelong connections, or at least career-long connections.
Yes.
And I walked into Fed Delhi, which is part of Sky City's casino in Auckland, New Zealand. It's the opposite of the casino, and they make really good Reuben sandwiches, by the way. But I walk in, and there's the head of marketing for one of the banks, the head of marketing for one of the big fisheries, the head of marketing for one of the big media outlets, and a head of marketing for another big CPG company, international CPG company, but local marketer leader in New Zealand. And I looked at her, I said, "What are you guys doing here?" We met at iMedia. We catch up once a month now to compare notes. I'm going, how good is that? Brilliant. That is gold. And that's, for me, that is head and heart, very fulfilling, That's awesome.
And I can feel it from you. Your energy and what you do is infectious. So you talked about, I'll quote it because it's a good one. "Smile and enjoy what you do. If you're having a good time, the team will come with you, and they'll create their own journey, their own good time as well, because you're actually opening up an environment and a culture. That's what happens. And if we do that, we actually deliver our best selves and best services to our clients."
Unfortunately, I'm not very good when I'm not having a good time. So, and I've learned that about myself. So, to get my best game, and then ultimately for the people around me, I have to be in that place. So, and it's taken me a long time to learn that about myself.
Yeah.
But I think that's been a really good lesson for me. So, if you find that you're enjoying yourself and you're smiling, the money comes, the team comes, and everything is happy and joyful. And as soon as that stops, you need some sort of like a circuit breaker to go, right, I need to either stop, either give myself a break or change.
Yeah, okay. So let me ask you a specific question then, because next gen leaders is not necessarily a generational thing. right? It's just a new way of thinking of how we do business. So you could be an aspiring leader, you could be an early stage leader, new to leadership, or you could be an experienced leader like yourself. Let's go back and look at Ryf, the aspiring leader and entrepreneur. What advice would you give Ryf 20 years ago?
I think probably Ryf hasn't been a very good planner for himself. He's been a very good planner for everybody else and for the brands he's worked for. And I think probably the one thing, I've been really fortunate. I've had some fantastic runs all the way through my career, but I probably could have made better decisions when I came to junctures. So I think for me, being a bit more considered and investing in yourself. I did that later. I went and did an MBA when I was, I think, 40, 41. And I probably should have done it 10 years earlier. I just certainly had the capacity to do it. And that was a game-changing year for me. I took a year out and did it. And all of a sudden, it slowed me down and made me think about things, but also put frames around things that made me structure my thought. Early on in my career, I was good at stuff, and people rang me up and said, "Ryf, come and work for me because you want," and I would. And they'd throw some money at me, and I'd turn up, and sometimes it would work, and sometimes it wouldn't. That's okay. But the point was, I probably wasn't used to. Wasn't considered in the decision making about myself and my career. I had some success, and I certainly had some high profile roles. But I think that probably being a little bit more considered. And that happened as I grew older and more mature.
Because you talked about planning, right? Invest in yourself was another thing you just said as well. But planning, because it's very typical for, I remember one guest saying, we're still running 400-year-old practices to run our businesses. You have a top-down model, make decisions, tell everyone what to do, and everyone just runs in a million different places to get things done. I mean, as you go down that model, planning becomes less of a focus, where execution becomes everything. And then the question is, are we executing on the right things? Where if we can all stop to plan, all stop to make, we call it transparency with context, know that that is the right things to do, then I can add value and collaborate with people around the context, not just things. But that personal planning is a really interesting observation for me.
And I just, it's led me all around the houses in terms of great career. I mean, the spontaneity of those sort of things has also led to me some really interesting positions I've ended up with. And I've met some amazing people. So that's the plus. But that may not necessarily, there might have been downside as well. There's a few things I wish I'd probably hadn't done.
And again, we learn from them, right? So I like the idea. I like a simple quote about being kind to your weaknesses, because sometimes we just beat ourselves up, and it does take time to understand them. Right?
And that's self-awareness took a while for me, but also to within your people in your team. Right. I talk about, goal strikers not practicing their defending skills, because sometimes it's just they need to get to a certain level and that's it. And they need to be. I've got an amazing eclectic group of people working for me now. Events is a lovely industry to work in from a team point of view. Because you have a really diverse group of people which have to respect each other. But they operate completely differently. Now I've got an event director who I love dearly. And she is awesome. Because she can do things I could never do. And I'm aware that through my awareness, I found people who complement me. And so she's a fantastic structuralist, planner, project manager, project lead, and then can actually impart that wisdom into her team. She is awesome. And then I've got salespeople who are on similar levels, who can make it rain in any direction I point them in. But you've just got to find common ground with those two people, because they're so opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
which really, is the beauty of teams, right? But it's a matter of how do we find the balance.
Yeah. And it's a high performing, high trust team.
Yeah.
So they know what they expect from each other, and they know what they shouldn't expect from each other, because they know this person's not going to do that.
Yeah.
No matter how hard you try.
Yeah.
And if you are going to expect them to do something, then you have to give them an upside.
Yeah.
To enhance what they do right now.
Yeah. Now that's really interesting, because the other thing I sort of think about when the way you talk about running teams and businesses, it's a process, and a process takes time. Evolution takes time. 100%. But if you know where you want to be in a period of time, and then you break down, well, okay, what do we need to do to get there? Let's agree everything's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we don't do that. We just want the results.
And that's a really good point. That this whole strive for perfection is not always it becomes a ball and chain, as opposed to sometimes stuff gets out and they go, cool, it's out, it's acceptable, it's not the best it could be, right? Yeah. But we know where we can improve.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's okay. But we shouldn't hold up the world because we're waiting for perfection in one element, because in my team, it's the process of rolling out an iMedia summit is quite linear. So everyone needs to do their bit to a certain time frame, to a certain standard, at a certain point in time, to allow the next person in the chain to play their best game.
Yeah, their best game. I love that.
And if it starts to slip and people start to disrespect timelines, it doesn't matter what element of the business they're in.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Then it actually impacts another person in a team, and it doesn't allow that person to really achieve the best outcome.
Yeah.
So I find that within my business that I spend a lot of time going, you need to be respectful of others. And not saying it that way, but it's more about, this has to be done. So it allows, marketing to do their role, and the delegate team to do their role, and the event production team to do their role in a way that is not taking their window from 8 weeks down to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so therefore they have to cut corners to get to the end.
Yeah.
You got to allow them to get 8 weeks a run of 8 weeks so they can do their job and do it really, really well.
Well, that's another good point as well around leadership is, yes, we may have a role and a function, but the more we can understand what the other dependencies are around us, the more considered you will be.
Yeah, we as we know, we spent some time talking, Martin, and then we actually, one of the outcomes of our discussion was actually building out some IP around the key junctures for content, marketing, event production, and sales.
Yeah. And
all the deadlines in the 6 months window that runs from the launching the event 6 months out to executing the event to 2 weeks after.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for us, then it became quite clear. It helped people understand their context and their operating context. Yeah. They could say, well, okay, if I don't finish my stuff here, then the next people, their window gets smaller, and they can see it then.
Yes, yeah.
And this year's became even more compressed because we've got this we're still sorting out COVID and delays and what have you. So we've actually got a whole bunch of things happening at the one time, which means we have to be even more disciplined and more respectful.
Yeah. And the other thing you talked about COVID is because not everyone's necessarily in the same room. And I know your teams are quite dispersed by geography. It actually allows us to, if we had that visibility and understand not just what I need to do, what everyone needs to do, consideration is effectively immediate because you can actually, visibility at least allows me to understand, right, what we need to do, who's got ownership, etc. But the other thing I also like in how you lead is I may have this ownership for something as part of the actual full end-to-end process, but I may be really passionate or have some knowledge of another area of that process. And I may be able to contribute in a way that can help move that piece forward. And I say to sort of, I say to leaders and everyone, it's not necessarily time to value because value is a really personal thing. what I value is different to what Ryf values. But if I get time to productivity and action, the right things that are going to add value to others, now I deem value as a personal intrinsic nature of feeling. And if we can create that open environment for people to do that, don't cookie cut them.
I would. I've been really fortunate. I've had really good stability with my staff. So most of my team have been with the business. Some of them 8 years.
Yep.
Some of them 4 years. So, and we basically collect people. We're like the firm. They have to go to a Bermuda and dine a diving accent to leave. But I think for me, one of the things that's been really important too is to go all the way the other way and go. Everyone's passionate about. Everyone's done a lot of this.
Yep.
And they're passionate about it, and we're in the best place we've been ever. So when people have got a bit of time, they like to contribute, and it's like, okay, there's no barriers about contributing and giving input. Yeah. That's never been an issue. Yeah. And we always foster that because everyone supports each other because everyone's invested in everyone else being successful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
But the challenge is that sometimes you got to go, well, okay, cool. No, it's okay. Park it. Right. And we'll look at that when we retool.
Yeah.
Because we'll have periods in the year where we'll go, okay, we're not doing anything. We're going to retool now. Everyone's going to have a rest. Or we're going to retool. It's up to you to make a little register for yourself. So when we get together, we can do that. So we've got a little offsite coming up in May.
Yep. And
I've got to write a little agenda for that. And really, we'll do 4 hours across a couple of nights away.
Yep.
But it allows people to then, in those forums, to everyone just doesn't matter. You can go. Doesn't matter if you're in sales or events or marketing or your back office accounting. It doesn't matter. You can have a say.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then it's up to me to allow people to weight that as in terms of order of importance.
Yeah, and you just actually touched on it because we've got ideation inside stratapp, for example, and I know a lot of our clients have used the idea of get the ideas in because some of them are they're like that. I had a chat to Ryf, and Ryf's just something amazing. Well, instead of writing it on a piece of paper that you're not going to just get it in the system, then we can prioritize it. Where does it play a role in helping our business move forward? But once you get somebody who's contributing that, they're investing into everyone's success. Right. Correct. The other thing too that we've learned through that process is, someone may have 100 good ideas, and then they sort of leave it to somebody else to try and action. They go, well, that didn't get action. But when they look at the ideas and then they look at the plan, and what you're talking about is how do we get, you said park it, and then you said something particular word, which I liked, but basically you're going to review it at the right time and then work out how we can incorporate it to get better.
Yeah, we have a really busy time. We have a busy time. We get to, by the end of September, we've got rid of all the big events. We've got a couple of little events, but they're not massive, overwhelming team things.
Yeah.
So for us, then it becomes a really good time, to go back to, the events team always has a nice log of things for me to look at. They always have, this process should be redone. We should do this differently. And the marketing for the sales guys, they're rebuilding our re-sign process. We have when we finish an event, we re-sign a lot. And they're thinking, well, okay, cool, we've got structure. What can we do now? And what can we do in October? Yep. And that's, if you want to improve this, we can make these changes now. These are little changes, but they make a big difference because we've looked at the current state and the desired state.
Yeah.
And this is a tech rebuild.
Yeah.
And we're not going to do any tech rebuild while the plane's flying. Yeah. So we're going to park that and we're going to talk about that in October.
Yeah, nice. So I want to ask you one more area because you touched on something really cool. And I think this is a really interesting one for all leaders. Entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. You talked about you've lived both, right? Yeah. And you've been incredibly successful with both. So let's talk a bit about your view on both and how do you see the difference between the two? And then, like managing the difference between the two, because there's definitely a difference of managing it. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I think it's a lot to do with the two ecosystems you sort of live in.
Yeah.
I was really fortunate enough to sort of fall into digital media, and I really discovered digital in the mid-90s. I went, right, And I found myself at George Patterson Bates, and they went, "I'm going to be in charge of digital." And they went, "Can you do your day job?" And I said, "Yes."
Yeah.
And they said, "Well, you can do both then." So, but through that sort of energy, I got to dragged out into a startup digital media agency as part of a wider digital agency.
Yeah.
And we had ANZ as a client. And so I would go in and see ANZ, and we got to launch internet banking for ANZ in Australia. And then through that, we won awards. This is all new to me. It all happened as it was all happening. And I thought, this is all good. I had a great time. And then we went out and won heaps of business because we were the only ones, and it was a new proposition and no one else was doing it. So you're winning all this media. And for me, that excitement was basically every meeting was an adventure. And I pinned myself to a very experienced MD of an old original advertising agency who taught me the patter and taught me the craft.
Right. Yeah.
To put everything from presenting credentials to closing deals.
Yeah.
And that was like, well, okay, my life became, I'm going to pick up the phone to the head of marketing for this big retailer or this bank or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, "Hi, I'm Ryf. You would have heard of me." "Yes, I have." And then I'd go and talk to them, and all of a sudden I'd be in their offices and presenting credentials, and quite more often than I would be walking away with, a brief for media.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it was more about, getting yourself out there and not being afraid that people would say no to you.
Yeah.
Because more often than they did, and they were fascinated because it was new, and they wanted to be part of it. And so therefore it was always a chance to have a meeting and make connections.
Yeah.
I love that part. That making connections also when I went internal, and I talk about entrepreneurship when I was at Deloitte.
Yeah.
With the rollout of CRM. The firm had all of its operations, all of its pipelines by industry group, by service line, all in spreadsheets. So every month, all those spreadsheets would roll up, be pushed off to the COO, and he would have to go through them, dedupe them, and work out the firm pipelines by office, pipelines by service line. Because you'd see, ANZ Bank would be in the fin services industry group, but it'd also be in the risk, pipeline. So all of a sudden they're counted twice. So you have to go, and it was a massive job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they wanted to roll out, they wanted to migrate all of the pipeline and sort of account management process from the individual spreadsheets into one CRM.
Yeah.
And for that, it was quite challenging because once again, it was a new thing.
Yeah.
People were interested, but also people didn't want to change.
Yeah.
With digital, they had to consider it because it was coming, right?
Yeah.
On the other side, they were, well, this is really working for me. Don't really care what has to happen at the top level because I'm making it rain and I'm getting paid my unit, so I don't care.
Yeah.
And so I had really good executive sponsorship, and we and I'd go out around the business, and people would say no to me.
Yeah, right.
And people never said no to me, and I was like, "This is insane." And so my world was 350 partners and 3,500 staff at the time, all across Australia. And I'm going, well, I couldn't work out. I get really down because a whole bunch of partners go, "Well, I'm not doing that."
Yeah.
And I'm going, well, you sort of have to.
Yeah.
And I had a CEO, Guillaume Swigers, who was an amazing guy. I would never have met him if I didn't go to Deloitte.
Yeah.
Whose mantra was when he signed up he'd do voicemail calls to all staff, and his sign off would be, "Have a little bit of fun today." He was a South African. He played for the Bulls.
Cool.
But he would, and I had to so first of all, I worked out that I'm not going to worry about the people who say no to me. I'm going to focus on the ones that say yes, which was really good because then every time I had interaction with those people, I felt really good about myself.
Yes. Yeah.
But Guillaume would say to me, "Tell me who's not using SmartNet," which is the CRM we were using.
Yeah.
And I will go and talk to them. I said, and I went, no. I'm not telling you who's not using it.
Yeah.
Because if I tell you that, they'll never speak to me again.
Yeah.
I've got to find other ways to win them.
Yeah.
right? Because he'll come in with a hammer and just smash them.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I would tell him, okay, these are all the partners that are superstars.
Yeah.
And he would go and, give them bonuses, do different things, do write-ups with them on SmartNet. That he would drop them key projects which would earn them more units. So all of a sudden, those partners who were starring in the CRM practice were made heroes within the firm and were earning more money because they were the ones who were playing the game.
Engaging. Yeah, that's really interesting.
And so from a tech adoption piece, that was really important. So all of a sudden, partners started going, well, I'm not getting these things.
Yeah.
And leadership were going, well, if Ryf's not telling me you're using it, are you using SmartNet? And they go, oh, yeah, we are. And then they go back and load everything into SmartNet.
I don't know if that's FOMO or what that is, but
but it was amazing. And so all of a sudden, they all came on board, and it was a huge adoption. And our COO could go, right, Fin Services pipeline, button. Sydney office, button, pipeline, bang. And that was really good. But the point I'm trying to make is I really think that entrepreneurship really just is the context.
Yeah.
In your context of internal, you can only operate within that ecosystem you have.
Yeah.
Right? I was still selling.
Yes. Yeah.
I was still selling something to them. I was still convincing them they had to do something that more often than not they didn't want to do.
Yeah.
In digital, there were a lot of people who went, I don't want to do this because I'm very happy buying magazines.
Yes.
Go away.
Yeah.
And that's cool. Right. But you didn't worry about them in advertising because there were so many of them in an environment inside of entrepreneurship, in an environment like Deloitte. A big chunk of them said no.
Yeah.
So you just had to, the first cut's not going to cut it. I'm not going to beat myself up about this. I'm just going to find another mechanism to get them across the line.
Yeah. And
within a firm like Deloitte, when you've got executive sponsorship, you've got to use all the levers available to you. If I'm going to go see a marketing from someone I don't know, it's really I get one shot.
Yeah.
Right. Unless there's someone in there, someone more senior than them says, "Oh, you need to speak to these guys again," and they go, "Oh, no, I've already spoken to them." But within a firm, eventually they've got to come. So if you do your first run and some of them say no, don't try to do it again. Don't go and have another meeting to convince them again. Find another lever. Find another lever to get you there. And if you've got the right people supporting you at a leadership point of view, an exco, then it's just about getting them to lean on all people the right way.
Yeah, and that would mean twofold, right? So focus on the yes, don't beat yourself up on the no, and then secondly, find the right leader who can then pull some of the levers on this is the direction. And by the way, they're finding it themselves based off one or two questions of why aren't they moving as far? Why aren't they involved? Well, you are, but you're actually deciding not to participate.
But the point is too, when I come back all the way around, the one thing across both was when I was succeeding, I was happy. So when people say no to you, you're not happy.
Yeah.
So don't focus on those people because they don't make you happy.
Yeah.
And so they'll come, right? You've got to trust yourself and find another way. And if you're happy, things start to stick.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's just, and so, it was, I'd go and the risk guys at Deloitte for some reason were just the personality types who loved it. And there was a really great bunch of partners across Melbourne and Sydney. And I'd go into their floor at Grosvenor Place or in the BHP building in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And I'd get just smiles and, awesome. and so if I had my tires pumped up, I'd go to certain areas of the firm because I go, doing this, doing that. It's awesome. And I go, no, I've had my pump up. Now I can go back to my day job,
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love that. Hey, well, you and I could talk for hours on this topic of leadership and how to do it and how to do it well. And, I appreciate you taking the time because you have had incredible success and you continue to do it and you continue to ask the question about happiness. And also, understanding your own abilities, strengths, and weaknesses. And then the other thing I really got out of this was surrounding yourself with people who can really complete the definition of what team is all about. everyone's good at certain roles, but we also understand that not everything's going to be perfect. But at the end of the day, if we can bring that energy and that happiness, we are going to ultimately achieve where we said we wanted to go. And I mean, credit to you, man. It's a real pleasure to hang and spend some time with you, because you just rub off in such a positive and high up tempo way.
Thanks, Martin. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, hey, mate, thanks very much for joining us. And if you're just, by the way, before we exit, when you look at this on the YouTube channel, you will see that this is my hometown, Brisbane, which is an hour up the road from that beautiful backdrop that Ryf's got, which is the Gold Coast in Queensland. So part of the most two beautiful places on the planet. So Ryf, thank you again for joining us. And if you're in Australia, definitely look up iMedia and also reach out to Ryf on LinkedIn. And connect with such an amazing individual. Ryf, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Marty. Appreciate the opportunity. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, buddy.
Bye.